We are here today to talk about what is the definitive way to play A Link to the Past. Is it a GBA? Is it an SNES?
Yes, with Echoes of Wisdom on the way soon, I think this is on a lot of people's minds. I want to squeeze in a playthrough of A Link to the Past to sort of refamiliarize myself with that world, or to be honest, that game's old. There might be people who, hey, I should play this game for the very first time and are going through this equation of like, well, there's these two different versions that are out there. What's going to give me the best experience?
Exactly.
So we want to go through, in a pretty good level of detail, the two versions and hopefully help you come a little bit closer to making that decision.
Yeah, and hopefully it makes it so that you pick the right one for you, so you can get familiar with the world of A Link to the Past, because it does really translate into Echoes of Wisdom.
There is some good news. The good news is this game is very accessible.
Thank goodness.
Both of these versions are on Nintendo Switch Online, the classic games. Obviously, if you're going with the GBA version, you do need the more deluxe version of that, which costs a little bit more money, but they're both there.
They're both there.
Which is great. It's not something you can say for every classic Nintendo game. Some of those are hard to get.
At least you don't have to go out retro game hunting and possibly pay hundreds and thousands of dollars for a cartridge.
Right. I mean, there are some cool ways that you can play this. Like if you have an analog pocket, you can get the original cartridge and play it that way and get the classic handheld experience. But we're going to be mostly focused on those NSO versions, because that's what most people are going to have available to them playing on the Switch.
Yeah.
The other good news, before we really dig into the differences, is these are both really good versions.
Right.
Obviously, the original is a classic for a reason, and the GBA version does make some trade-offs, but also has some interesting little tweaks and some exclusive content too.
Exactly.
So either way you go, like we'll tell you now, either way, you're going to have a good time.
You're going to have a good time.
But again, you might want to go through all the differences to understand. Like I will prefer one or the other. So that's what we're going to do today. Why don't we start with just the graphics of the game, the look of the game. I think most people would agree that the SNES version does have stronger graphics.
Yeah.
The GBA graphics, they can look a little bit washed out, but I think the biggest change is that the SNES version has a bigger field of view.
Exactly.
Meaning you're seeing more of the game world on the screen at any one time.
Exactly. Yeah, the GBA obviously was built for handheld, so you just have a much smaller field of vision. You're still walking screen to screen as with a top-down Zelda game, but the SNES version does give you that like wider world view, which is nice. And
right.
Yeah.
And again, if you're playing on NSO, one other kind of visual thing to keep in mind is that it does give you in the options those different kind of filters that you can put on.
Right, so you can do pixel perfect filters.
Right. So there's a couple different ones. I personally, interestingly, when I'm playing on the SNES, I don't really like the CRT filter that much. For some reason, that doesn't really work for me.
It's a little distracting sometimes.
But when I play on GBA, I do really like, I think they call it like the classic feel, where you can see the individual pixels. Yeah. I really like that, so I turn that on. So again, go into that menu, fiddle with it.
See what you like.
NSO is super snappy. It's not a lot of time to find one. How do you like to play these?
I have not been playing with the pixel perfect filter on, actually, but I would like to see it. I haven't been bothered by the graphics on the GBA version.
Yeah, again, it's not like it's dramatically worse. It is a little bit different. Yeah. And I think that's a theme that's going to go across this discussion, is like there are differences, but again, in the end, they both add up to be really good versions.
Right. And we should say that we are doing our playthrough right now for the next spoiler cast. And we are playing two different versions, so we can come to you with like what did it actually feel like.
I'm playing the SNES version.
And I'm playing the GBA version.
You're playing the GBA version.
Right.
This is not our first time playing this game. We played this game again and again from when we were young, so we got to have some familiarity with it.
And when you were young, you played the SNES version.
Yeah, I never actually had the GBA version.
Same. Yeah. So I also played the SNES version. So this is my first time playing the GBA version.
Let's look at the sound design and just sound overall.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the few things where you can clearly say the SNES is just better.
Yeah.
It just has more capable, sound technology inside of it. I compared, when you go into the castle for the first time, that really iconic song that plays.
Right.
The GBA version's having a hard time
Getting all
keeping
the-
up
yeah.
with the full range of that song that's on
Right.
the SNES version. So I do think that is one of the bigger differences in these versions.
Yeah, I agree. The sound is probably the biggest thing that might give you a point against the GBA version, where it is quite noticeable that the sound design is really different. They're just very limited on that hardware, so they're doing the best they can. But the sound quality is definitely very different than the SNES version. And the other thing, and I actually didn't notice this until someone brought it up, and now I cannot unhear this. So I'm gonna pass this little annoying thing off to you guys too, so you can suffer with me. But they added these sound effects for Link when he's swinging the sword, like some yelly, like sound effects.
Yeah.
But he does it every single time.
Every time you swing that sword, you're getting a Link sound.
You swing that sword, he's doing a little Link scream. And it's getting a little annoying, I gotta say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I did go through the GBA version just to get a bit familiar with it. Obviously, I didn't play through the whole game. It wasn't bothering me that much because in the later Zelda games, you do kind of get that when you're swinging the sword around.
Yeah.
Maybe in this game, you're swinging it more.
Yeah,
than
you're really
are.
like swinging that sword, and he's
Sword's
just
out all the time.
yelling like into the ether.
But yeah,
so.
in the SNES version, he's mostly silent.
Quiet.
Yeah.
Shh, Link, just calm down.
Exactly.
Be quiet.
Controls on this topic, they're mostly the same. I think one big difference is just, the nature of the original controllers they were using. The SNES controller had 6 buttons,
Right.
4 face, 2 shoulder. On the GBA, you had 2 on the face and 2 on the shoulder. So some
Right.
things are remapped.
Yes. I had some problems with the remap buttons because, again, I grew up playing the SNES version. And when I first started playing the GBA version, I could not figure out for the life of me how to pick up a pot. And I got into that first dungeon and I was like, I know what I need to do. I need to pick up this pot to step on the switch. And I had to look it up and I was like, oh, that's right. They had to remap these buttons because there was 2 less buttons, 2 less face buttons.
There.
So then I figured it out. But there you go. So if you're getting into it, just remember that the buttons are remapped. And it might just take you a little getting used to figure out the control scheme on the GBA version.
Right, but it's not like there's any control options that have been removed.
No. Yeah.
And I think as far as just,
confusing.
the actual moment-to-moment gameplay of walking around, hitting things with the sword, they both feel pretty much
similar. Yeah,
the same, I would say.
Yeah.
I did want to point out, if you really want to get that classic feel, there are some special controllers, third-party controllers that you might want to look at and consider picking up. These are 2 from 8BitDo that I have that are more sort of retro-oriented. This one is the 8BitDo SN30 Pro.
I love this controller. This one feels exactly like a classic SNES controller.
It's got the same shape as the SNES controller. The buttons feel very similar to the original. The D-pad I like a lot.
D-pad is good.
And it does have these sticks, so you can play it with other kind of more modern games as well. But this one I really like with retro games. That sells for about $45. This is the 8BitDo Lite, which is making some concessions. There are no sticks, so it is really specifically for retro games.
Yeah.
And the buttons are a bit clickier, I would say.
They're also a little shallower.
Yeah.
The shallow buttons kind of bug me a little bit.
But some different people have different preferences when it comes to these
I like
controllers.
a deep button press.
The other thing I would say is, and again, it doesn't matter for playing a true retro game. These kind of other shoulder buttons are
pretty small.
Made down to these smaller buttons here.
Yeah.
So I've been using the SN30 Pro to play.
Yeah, that's cool.
The NSO SNES version, and it
Yeah.
feels really great. I do want to play those games with a D-pad, and whether obviously the Joy-Con don't really have a D-pad to speak of,
Right.
And on the Pro Controller,
It feels kind of weird, right?
it doesn't really work as well as something
Yeah.
like this. So there's a lot of different options. Those are just the ones that I have. But if you want that true experience, there
can do that.
there are choices out there.
It's kind of nice that there are options, right? Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of what was changed or adapted in the GBA version.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot, and we don't want to harp on minutia, but as far as things that you might notice, the things that set these two versions apart, there are some interesting things.
Yeah, so they did add some quality of life updates, but they also added new content into the GBA version, which is notable.
Yes.
The other thing that's important to note about the GBA version is it was actually 2 games. So it came with A Link to the Past and also Four Swords.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of connectivity between the two, which I thought was pretty imaginative for the time, where if you did something in Four Swords, it would show up and it would affect your A Link to the Past game.
Yes.
So there is some kind of cool crossover stuff that happens in this version that if you are into that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But things that they did, some quality of life stuff. There is the infamous Ice Palace dungeon. I do have a clear memory. I was just saying to you that there's parts of this game that I remember really well. There's parts of this game that I am fuzzy on, but this one I remember being annoying.
Yeah.
So I haven't gotten there yet on the GBA version, but I'm excited to see the redesign because that was an annoying dungeon. I didn't like it.
Yep.
So.
There's also some revised localization. So, for example, in the original, there's a lot of references to wise men who have been updated to sages.
Right.
Again, the Zelda kind of lore and terminology was still getting worked out.
Right. Early days.
All those days in the early 90s. So, revisiting it, they've had a chance to update some of that.
Yeah.
Some of the menus are a bit more streamlined. I wouldn't say in any kind of radical way, but just some slight tweaks.
Right.
Eventually, you do get the capability to sort of warp around the map and do a little bit of fast travel. They did add one additional fast travel location in the GBA version in an important place that maybe is a bit spoilery, so I won't say exactly what it is, but it's nice to have that. And then there's kind of just another fun addition, which is your weapons and your items can interact with the world in more ways. So when you get your sword to a certain level, you can just smash a pod instead of having to pick it up or throw it, or you can break it with the bow and arrow. So it's fun to just go around and chop things down and interact with the world. And there's just more ways that you can do that in this version of the game, which is nice.
Yeah, there is a quest in this game that makes you chop down a sign. So you might need to play the GBA version for that. Yeah.
And then the save games in the SNES version, you kind of always are rebooted to a static location every time, where there's a bit more freedom of picking up closer to where you saved in the GBA version, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. So good stuff.
So those are some of this kind of small, slight tweaks that they added that are in the GBA version. But yeah, let's look at the exclusive content that's only in the GBA version. You mentioned it includes this whole other game, Four Swords, which now has spawned all these other Four Swords adventures, all these other types of multiplayer games. And again, that's only in that version. And in the NSO version, you can play
both.
And you can play that online, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
With that.
Yeah.
But again, we want to really focus on A Link to the Past because that's the core experience we think most people are looking to have now. There is a new move that you can unlock for Link in A Link to the Past. It's the Hurricane Spin, which you may remember from Wind Waker. And there is sort of a fetch quest with this lumberjack character that you find, who, if you do everything that he wants you to do, you can unlock that. I will say, it is a bit tedious to do that.
To do the fetch quest,
It's going to take you about 3 or more playthroughs of Four Swords and really doing well in Four Swords to be able to get that.
Right.
It's kind of a fun move. You just sort of spin around until you hit something. So again, I wouldn't say it's required for the game, but it is sort of a fun bonus.
It's a fun little extra thing that you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another fun addition is you do also unlock these statues of Link and Zelda in Link's house, which is
very cute.
Which is nice.
Yes.
Perhaps even bigger than that, there's a whole exclusive dungeon that's only in the GBA version. This is the Palace of the Four Sword, which is in the Great Pyramid in the Dark World.
Yeah, and that one's cool because if you have beaten A Link to the Past and Four Swords, you can gain access to this dungeon. And it has like a lot of remix fights. Like you're not fighting, totally new things, but they remix it from the first 4 bosses in the Dark World. So you're battling against that. And then there is a fun like final battle where you battle the 4 swords links.
Yeah.
So each color comes out,
right.
You do a little thing with them. So it is a fun way that they have sort of added content from both games, like do the crossover, which is really imaginative.
Yeah, and people do say that that dungeon is relatively challenging compared to some of the other dungeons in the game. So, if you're really, you do need to finish those 2 games to unlock this. So it is a good test of everything that you've learned so far. And it does sort of introduce some new uses of items and tools that you get in the game that you're not really asked to do it in that way.
Yeah.
So it is kind of nice to use your brain a different way of like, this item can actually do this now. That's kind of a fun way that because these developers had time to revisit and rethink of like, well, what can you actually do? So that is neat.
And you get a little new credit roll.
Yes,
when that happens,
you do
complete that dungeon.
You get the credits roll showing the Dark World, and then another thing that's cool is it does tell you how many times you used each of the different items in the game. So, like, I really am a boomerang fiend. Reconfirming what I already knew.
Reconfirming your own habits.
So that's probably the biggest kind of exclusive addition to that version. I know people feel different ways of like, this wasn't the original developer's intent. You're kind of shoehorning this thing that wasn't here before, like, does it fit? Does it vibe with,
you don't have to do
everything else?
Is the thing.
It's optional. You don't have to do it.
But it's there.
But it is there. So, yeah, those are really the big differences, changes, additions that you need to know. Again, the good news is these are both really good versions.
Yeah, and they're both available.
They're both available.
Accessible.
So whichever you choose, you're going to have a good time. This is an absolute all-time classic game.
Oh my gosh.
For a reason.
Right.
So if you have not played this game leading up to Echoes of Wisdom, we
should.
really recommend that you do because you're going to have a great time and you might have a leg up on that game.
Exactly. And we are playing this game as our next spoiler cast game. So if you're playing along, that's awesome. We want to, share that experience with all of you. Tell us in the comments if you've ever played this game before. If so, which version did you play it on? You've never played this game. Tell us why, because that's sad. But yes, we hope that this helps you decide which version you'll be jumping into, and hopefully it helps you when you get a chance to play Echoes of Wisdom. All right, we're going to wrap this up, and we'll see you later. Bye.